So to start with, dark skies are a Colorado treasure when you think about it. If you lived on the East Coast or many other places in the world, you can't even see the stars, much less the Milky Way. So out here in the West in Colorado, it's definitely something very special. It's even a tourist attraction. People will come here to see the night skies. This particular picture was taken at Walker Ranch Homestead. Who's ever been up there off of Flagstaff Road? And in Boulder. Mike Lohr is one of my coworkers that I worked with in Boulder County. He takes wonderful dark sky photos as well. So this is right, next to Boulder, up in the hills. You get those lights of Boulder, but you can still see the Milky Way, which is really nice. So what are some reasons to protect the night sky besides astronomy? Who can tell me? Why would we want to protect the skies?
Birds.
Birds, yeah, for sure. Night flying birds. What else?
It's made of air and we breathe it.
Yeah. Health, human health. Right, so let's look at that. So there's four main things I'm kind of going to talk about here. The first, of course, is astronomy. Getting to see those constellations and galaxies and nebulas, planets, all of that stuff. Getting to see that with dark skies. The second thing is nocturnal wildlife. We've got over 200 species of birds that migrate over North America every year. And they migrate at night. There's that many just migrating at night. So we'll talk about that more, but they use the stars, they use lots of little landmarks and things like that. Human health is another thing. If you've ever had to do shift work or change your sleeping patterns or try to sleep during the day, you know how hard that is. And humans need darkness. Even though we're active during the day, we also need darkness. And the last thing is our whole connection to the universe. So if you can't see the skies, it's easy to forget that we're a part of something much bigger than the planet Earth. So it's just a kind of good reminder. So we're going to look at these each a little more closely. We're going to start with astronomy. What's this picture of? Somebody tell me. Yeah. What is it exactly, one of these astronomy people?
Butterfly.
Yeah. This is a Hubble image. And isn't that wonderful to be able to see stuff like that? Of course, you're not going to see that by looking at the sky. The Hubble took that picture, but still, it's that whole thing, all the stuff that's up there. So, astronomy is our oldest natural science. It has been around generations and generations, all kinds of cultures. Way back in the ancient days, they had a picture, an idea of Atlas holding up the sky. And they may have been wrong about a few things, but they were probably a lot more connected to the skies than we are. Because there was no light pollution, there was no electricity, there was no computers. So when it got dark, they looked up. And they paid attention. They made stories about their own lives in the stars and in the constellations. And those stories were reflected back to them from the stars, which is kind of interesting to think about. They paid attention to the stars as far as when to plant crops or when to do different things, what was happening with the seasons. Very much in touch with that. But we can look to the future as well today. When you think about it, I'm sorry, I'm doing this mic. If we go outside and we look up, we can remember what our ancestors have done and in the past and think about where we're going. This is a picture taken from Rabbit Mountain on Highway 66. Who's been to Rabbit Mountain before? In Boulder County, we did our astronomy programs at Rabbit Mountain. And it's about 3 miles north of Highway 66. So you get a lot of Boulder light, which you can see right here. But you can still see the Milky Way. It's dark enough to be able to do that. So there's ways we can really look up and find things. Astronomy is part of a lot of people's culture and background, like we talked about. One thing that's interesting, we talked about this a little bit on the wall here, that here's the Big Dipper right here, and the Big Dipper is actually what's called an asterism. It's part of a bigger constellation, which is Ursa Major, the Big Bear. So if, those two stars right here point us to Polaris, the North Star. And we're spinning, you heard the spinning underneath the North Star. So when you're in the Northern Hemisphere, as you're going through the night and through the seasons, it looks like the Big Dipper and the Little Dipper and Cassiopeia are spinning around the North Star. It's actually us spinning underneath that. So we see the Big Dipper all here because it's close to the North Star. So we call it the Dipper, but if you're in Germany, you would call it the wagon. Or if you're in England, you would call it a plow, like you plow your field. There's so many other ways to see that. This picture on the right is an illustration from the Navajo tradition, and it shows the North Star as a fire, or like a campfire, and the constellations around that represent members of the family. So it's like a family centered around the campfire together. So lots of really interesting messages about the constellations that we see in the stars. The National Park Service has been a big, I don't know if you want to say promoter or instigator for a lot of interest in the skies. Back in the 60s, they were doing where they had what they called sidewalk astronomers. So people would bring telescopes, astronomers would bring telescopes way back in the 60s already, and get people interested in looking at the stars. And the thing about national parks is that they're open 24 hours a day for the most part. So a lot of other parks close at sunset or 10 or 11 o'clock at night, but the national parks are open all the time. So it's great to go in and be able to see the stars. Like you can go to Rocky any time of the day. They did a survey at one point and discovered that 90% of visitors thought that seeing a dark sky was very important to them. They were going to national parks to see the dark skies, which is pretty cool. Who's been to astronomy programs at Rocky Mountain National Park? Oh, you need to go if you haven't been. They do them in the summertime. It's usually like every other Friday. And they do them at Upper Beaver Meadows. And they have amateur astronomers coming from Denver and Boulder and Fort Collins and Longmont, bringing scopes out there. And they can have several hundred people sometimes.
Oh, cool.
It's pretty amazing. And
Watch out for the deer on the drive home.
yeah, watch out for the deer on the drive home. We locked our key in the car one time there too, which was not fun. But yeah, it's great. It's a great opportunity to get out where it's dark and talk to people with questions and things like that. It's really nice. I love the slogan they have on the poster. This is from Price National Park. Half the park is after dark.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, that's one thing we forget, is that half of every day is night. So, let's go on to wildlife. I'm going to share some examples of nocturnal wildlife with you. First of all, a few statistics. This is also from the National Park Service. So 63% of mammals are nocturnal. That's more than half of the mammals on the Earth are active at night. More than half of all the invertebrates, half of the insects, 62% of all species are nocturnal. So nighttime is a pretty busy time for a lot of critters. And what that also means is that artificial light is another form of habitat loss. So we think about, when buildings are built or neighborhoods are built or whatever, we lose habitat for wildlife. But light pollution is also a form of habitat loss. The first one I want to talk about is indigo bunting. This is a beautiful little blue bird, and it migrates between North and Central America at night. And so for years, scientists kind of knew that these birds used the stars in some fashion. They weren't exactly sure what they were doing, and so they did some experiments in like a really large planetarium. And when the birds are ready to migrate, and I'm not going to go into all the details, but basically, when the birds are ready to migrate, they put them in the planetarium and they watched to see what they would try to do. Well, there was time to fly south, and they would immediately fly away from the North Star. in a planetarium because they're trying to go south. Even if they move the North Star to different places in the planetarium where it wasn't really in the north, the birds would still fly away from it. And so, remember what we talked about, with spinning underneath the North Star. So this is a time-lapse type photo that shows you how everything looks like it spins around. Well, they started thinking about this, and there's that picture of the dipper too. And they thought, well, maybe they're not just flying away from the North Star, maybe they're looking at the pattern of the stars. So they reconfigured the planetarium to where everything revolved around Betelgeuse. So though Betelgeuse is in what constellation, who knows?
Orion.
Orion, yeah, Orion is in the southern part of the sky. So though they did the planetarium, the stars would go around Betelgeuse instead of Polaris, and they put the birds in there, and which way do you think they flew?
Away from Betelgeuse.
Away from Betelgeuse, no matter where it was. So they were looking at the pattern of the stars. Now birds don't just use stars, they'll use a lot of other things too, but it just shows that stars are something they're paying attention to and they need to be able to see them in order for that to work. Here's another interesting thing about birds. If you're a bird and you're flying through the forest and you're looking for those little lighted pathways to get through the trees, which the moon and the stars usually provide a little light, you look for those open spaces like that. Well, if you look at a tall building,
Oh my.
what do you think what does that look like? It looks like you should be able to fly through those open spaces, but what's going to happen? They're going to get the glass, right? So a lot of cities have started these lights out campaigns. And Toronto in Canada was one of the earlier cities that did this. They had some volunteers who walked around in the downtown area where all the tall buildings were. In the morning, they would find hundreds to thousands of dead birds that had just hit the wind and it was during the night. And so they started these big campaigns. It was like, turn the lights out. If you're going home at night, there's no reason to have the lights on. Nobody's in those buildings. Turn the lights off. And then far, far fewer birds were killed. They were just, it just was really throwing them off to see the lights like that. Fireflies. Who's caught fireflies before and chased fireflies? They're so fun. Fireflies are actually little beetles. And they use light. They produce this chemical in their body that makes light. And they do it to establish territory, to find mates, to communicate with each other, and they do it in the darkness. So they knew for a long time that, on a full moon you wouldn't see as many fireflies because they really need the darkness to do that. But with light pollution, it's become much harder for these fireflies to do what they need to do. And so we don't see as many as we used to. I remember seeing fireflies all summer long when I was a kid. But there's a lot of places like the Butterfly Pavilion is now doing some research with us, trying to help fireflies and decrease light pollution. So things we can do. The mighty dung beetle. This is one of my favorites. So what does a dung beetle do? What does it do? Yeah, it goes to a poop pile, right? And it rolls up a ball of poop like that, and it rolls it away from the poop pile as fast as it can and takes it to its nest. It's a very important service to us because they get rid of that stuff for us and then they use it. So what they noticed about dung beetles is that they get on the top of the little ball like this, and they're rolling on backwards, but they're managing to go in a straight line. But they would notice that they would look up like this to the sky. And this is the African dung beetle. There's lots of species of dung beetles. And they did a study with them. And so what they did is they put these little hats on the dung beetles. and so when the beetles had those little hats on, they couldn't get the piles rolled away into a straight line. They couldn't get away. And that's important because if you don't get it away fast enough, another dung beetle is going to steal your prize. So you've got to get it away fast in a straight line. They had a control group and they put little clear hats on some of the beetles just to make sure that it wasn't the hat itself that was causing the issue. And the beetles that had the clear hats had no problem, because they could see, look up and see the sky. And then what they noticed is that if the Milky Way was visible, they would actually follow the line of the Milky Way.
So those beetles had their eyes were tuned to visible light?
They were looking at the stars, apparently, yes.
Interesting.
Following patterns in the stars, the Milky Way or something, who knows? I mean, it's hard to understand all of it, but that was obviously something that was very helpful to them. And when they can't see the stars, or they can't get those guiding lights, it was harder for them to do what they're supposed to do, which is get rid of the poop for us. Sea turtles. This is from Florida, a little study that was done there some years ago. So what sea turtles do is they come and lay their eggs right on the beach, and they leave. And so sometime later the eggs hatch, and the little turtles come out, and usually what would happen is light reflected from the moon and the stars is kind of bouncing off the ocean, and that attracts them, and they go right to the ocean, which is where they're supposed to be, and they're safe. But when they're next to a town like this, they had volunteers follow them, and look what happened. They all ended up going to the town because all the lights were there. And of course, if that happens, you know, a predator's going to get over, they're going to tire, and they're not going to make it. So, you know, a lot of these towns now will dim lights, especially during turtle season, or they'll have volunteers that are out helping the turtles get to the ocean. So there's things we can do that make a difference. But those little turtles need to see that natural light. So we'll go on to human health. Like we mentioned before, people need darkness as well as light. There have been a variety of studies. And first of all, light is the single most effective signal. It trains our circadian system as far as how much sleep we need and being awake during the day. Melatonin, which everybody's heard about these days, is actually a naturally produced hormone, and it's produced in the absence of light. So when it's dark, your body produces melatonin, and it's a protector against disease and cancer and things like that. So if you don't get enough darkness, that melatonin is not produced, or at least not produced sufficiently. So a number of studies have been done where they've determined that when there's not enough darkness, there's more evidence of cancer and things like that as well. Clean air is another thing we don't often associate with light pollution, but of course you're using less fossil fuels when you don't have lights on all the time. But the other thing is nitrate radicals are these things that are produced that break down chemicals from car exhaust and stuff. And they only form during the absence of light. And so when you have a lot of bright artificial lights, it affects the levels of those radicals, and the cleansing of our air doesn't happen as well. So another thing that affects our health. The fourth thing is that whole sense of wonder. If you can't look up and see the sky, you can't wonder. Yes, you had a question?
I'm sorry.
That's okay.
On the last one,
Yeah.
Are you saying that the air breaks down differently whether it has light, or is it just photons itself, or?
Gosh, you're asking me really hard scientific questions. If somebody else has a,
Now we're talking about a chemical process,
This is
right?
super, I'm just trying to make
Yeah.
sense of that.
yeah, I have to say I don't quite understand it that well myself. But who's a good scientist in here? Is there anything?
Engineering, you know, and I'm not the best at chemistry or anything else too. But what that's saying is that the nitrate radicals are a chemical, right? So they're part of the chemical process, right? So it's that helps break down the chemicals from the car exhaust, but those don't, they form with a lack of sunlight or a lack of light, right? So it's not forming as many of those, right? So it's part of the, you know, and nitrogen is a huge part of our atmosphere, right? So it's, you know, those things that can form in the absence of light. So it is a chemical process.
Thank you.
But I mean, you know, light, you know, there are a lot of chemicals that are light sensitive. I mean, I used to work in in an industry where we use ultraviolet, adhesives, where we're using UV light to cure those adhesives very rapidly. Very high-speed production lines where you're using light to cure those. So light is an important process in some chemical processes.
Well, even the top of the sky, the molecular structure will scatter the red light. That's why the sky looks blue. So it does have an effect. Not sure what the actual effect is, but it does have an effect.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks very much. So, once again, that sense of wonder, remember where our place is in the universe. And this is another photo that was taken at Ohio Valley Ranch down the road. And if you think about, protecting our dark skies extends our care of animals and plants, our health on planet Earth, if we can understand our place. The other thing I'd like to mention about this is that a lot of open spaces or natural areas, we talk about protecting that horizontal space for recreation, for wildlife, for the views and things like that. When you do that, you're also protecting the vertical space, and you're protecting the sky above. When you keep, development from happening in every inch of, the planet. Let's talk about what is light pollution. So the first thing at the top is called sky glow, and that's when you have the lights from a city that permeate up into the horizon. When you look down at Boulder or Fort Collins or Loveland or any of the places, we see that light coming out. That's called sky glow. The second here is light trespass, and that's exactly what it sounds like. It's light trespassing someplace where it's not supposed to be. Like if your neighbor has a huge bright floodlight that's going into everybody else's yard, that's light trespass. Light glare is very glaring light. So if you look at these four pictures, set a pointer here. We've got the two very bright lights here on the left. Now what happens when you look at these, your eyes are immediately drawn to that huge bright light, right? That's the first thing you see. And when you look at a bright light, one thing that happens is your pupils shut down and you lose a lot of your night vision. So that's one thing that's happening, but also you can't see very well anything else that's happening around that. If you look at the two on the right, these lights are more subdued, they're pointing down, because light pointing up in the sky doesn't do anybody any good. It's just wasted. So it's pointing down, provides light UV, but it's not overtaking everything. There's a person standing under each one of these lights, but you can't really see them on the left. It's another thing about safety. It's not necessarily safer to have a huge bright light because you can't see the shadows. So on the right, you can see this person here, and you're getting all the light you need. I'd also like to think about this related to camping. Like you're out camping, and if you immediately turn on a flashlight, all you see is the light right in front of you. And if you turn it off, you see the night. You see everything around you. Your vision is actually much better, especially if there's a moon out. You can actually be more aware of what's around you with a natural light. So here's another example of light glare. Here's a house that has a really bright light, but if you put your hand up and kind of cover the light, look how much better you can see. And what's over here? There's a person standing up there too, but you can't see them. It's just basically the same shadow. And they're right, where's it here? Okay, here we go. He's right here too, but you just can't see him. So somebody had a question, I saw a hand go up.
We were shielding.
Yeah, there you go.
It's funny, I can read the guy's name on the one on the top, but I can't read it
On
on
the
the
bottom, yeah.
Yeah. So there's just a good example. You can try that at home too sometime. You have a light, there's a bright light, put your hand in front of it and notice how much better you can see. This all relates to crime and safety as well. There have been a variety of studies, and one thing to think about is that a lot of crime happens during the day.
Oh.
When, like for instance, if your neighborhood things are happening during the day, people aren't going to pay as much attention to what's going on as they would at night. So there's a lot of stuff that happens during the day. light creates all these shadows, makes places for people to hide. They did a study in Iowa several years ago where they changed all the street lights and did everything, and made everything much more subdued and took away a lot of the lights. And people were predicting that the crime rate was going to rise. And instead it did the opposite. It actually went down. International Dark Sky Association is an international thing. It's all over the world, and each year there's a Zoom conference that anybody can go to that's free, and they have speakers from all over the world that share different things about what they're doing and different cultural stories and things like that as well. Really, really a fun, interesting thing to be part of. Some of the main goals of the International Dark Sky Association, first of all, we provide certification for dark sky locations. If you've ever been, who's been to places certified as a dark sky site? Yeah, and especially in the western part of Colorado, there's quite a few. It's really dark over there. And it's a pretty long process that they have to go through to be certified, but it's really an honor to have that. The second thing is we promote friendly lighting to preserve dark skies, to encourage people to use the right types of lights. And then third, we encourage educational programs and signage so that people understand why that's important. Dark Sky Colorado is the Colorado branch of that, and that's the one I'm affiliated with. And we do lots of fun stuff, and one of the things I wanted to share with you that we just did this past year is we got a bill passed in the Colorado government here that basically is the whole reason for it is to protect the dark skies of Colorado. And so through that, the goals are to provide like technical assistance grants to places that want to be certified, to give them help so they can get through that process, and to provide education and outreach for not only residents but also tourists. So some details about that. It was actually bipartisan, and it was from senators on the western slope. So $35,000 was transferred from the general budget in Colorado to help provide funds for this. Dark Sky Colorado, we're currently working with a number of places that are trying to be certified, and we help them go through the process, provide mentors, things like that, so that it's a little easier. And we want to promote that sustainable use of open space. So it's not, let's go to love our lands to death, so to speak, but how do we appreciate these skies and also take care of them and take care of our state. So it also includes education. We're working on a variety right now of brochures and posters that will be put up in campgrounds and visitor centers to make people more aware of the importance of dark skies. Lights Out Colorado, we talked about Lights Out a while ago. There's also a Lights Out Colorado program. This is part of Dark Sky Colorado, and we basically really encourage people to turn lights out in the fall and the spring when birds are migrating at night, to help them and to keep the light from being such a problem. So we also had a teacher on the board that created all kinds of educational materials for, to be used in classrooms, especially for elementary age kids. And it relates to migrating birds as well as the importance of dark skies. These are all free. If you go to the dark sky site, if you're a teacher, you know somebody who might want to use those, you just sign up and say, I want these materials, and we'll give you the link. So, kind of a fun way to get kids involved. So to give you an idea of birds and the importance of birds at night, these are some survey results from Audubon. They do all kinds of surveys of bird migration. This is from this past August and September. They counted, went out and all these volunteers counting and figuring out, doing calculations. Anywhere from 11 to 14 or 24 million birds were flying over Colorado in one night. So to put that in perspective, we have about 6 million people that live in the state of Colorado. There's a lot more tourist birds than there are people. A lot of birds flying through at night. in Boulder Canyon, actually back when I was in Fort Collins, we did some dark sky studies. And what we did is we used this little thing called sky quality meter, and you basically hold it up and you press the button and it gives you a dark sky reading. So we did this for a number of reasons. We wanted to just kind of see the comparison of the darkest places that we could find, and also to reinforce how open space agencies were protecting the skies by also protecting the land in general. So we started out just doing this on open space properties, and we thought, well, we need comparison. We have to have some comparison. And so we started also measuring in towns. We went into cities and the towns. I had volunteers that would take the meters to their neighborhoods and do a reading at their house. So we got this kind of overall view, and the volunteers loved this. They couldn't wait every year to go out and do this and do the readings. It was really a fun project. So as a result, we got this map put together. This was Boulder County, and get this pointer again. So you can see the darker the dot, the darker the sky. So if you look over here, here's Boulder, there's Longmont. You've got Lafayette, Louisville, Superior down here. And here's the mountains. This is the south end of Rocky Mountain National Park here. We didn't go up there.
Is there a numerical scale attached to this color?
Yeah, the yellow and green.
Well, there isn't specifically a numerical scale. I mean, what happened was I worked with our GPS department, and I gave them all the readings, and then they kind of assigned, darkness, or the darkest dot to the lightest dot with the readings that we had. We don't necessarily have a little
Legend.
Yeah, exactly.
The reason I ask is we do have a dark sky meter, and like an idiot, it's sitting on my kitchen table. Because I've been using it to measure the sky at my house, and about 3 miles west of Loveland, right? And trying to figure out what that correlates to.
Yeah, I can kind of tell you some background on that. So basically with the reading of these, like a sky at night around here will go anywhere from about 19 to 22 is about the darkest you can get. It's very incremental. It's like an earthquake. So you have a 7.1 earthquake is way bigger than a 6.9. There's a lot of space in there, and these readings are the same way. So up here, for instance, this is Caribou Ranch Open Space and Mud Lake, which is right next to Netherland. Look at Netherland, the lights of Netherlands right there. But these are our darkest places that we found in the county, and they were 21 point something. It was pretty dark right here. Walker Ranch is over here. It was a little less dark, but still very dark. In town here we had readings of 18, 19, things like that. What do you get out of here, Mark?
The best I've gotten in my house is a 20.3.
Oh, that's not bad. Yeah, it's pretty good.
The funny part was I had the bedroom light on in my bedroom, and I walked by the side of the house with it, and it went down to 17.
Yeah.
So, I mean, just the
makes a
difference
huge
from the back of
difference.
the house and the side of the house.
Well, like up here, so you've got Highland Valley Ranch, Hall Ranch up here, and then Rabbit Mountain and stuff. And so you can see where the darker places are, obviously. But then the towns, you've got these light dots. But even between the towns here, it gets darker. Like you were saying, it doesn't take much to get away from it a little bit, which is nice. And Boulder County has a lot of undesignated, areas that cannot be developed. So between these towns, there's not a lot of development, and you can actually see the difference in the darkness. But it's just kind of a nice overview to see what that looks like when you put all those readings together. The National Park Service has a really cool camera. It's called a charge coupled device. And what it does is they set it up and it makes like a 360-degree image. It takes about an hour to do that. And these are some of the images it came up with. So first one was from Trail Ridge Road up on Rainbow Curve. And you can see the lights of the Front Range there coming up. But you can still see, you know, the Milky Way. I mean, it's pretty dark when you go on Pearl Ridge Road, but look at how much those lights are still coming up there. These next two, the top one is from Soapstone Prairie Natural Area. Who's been up there? Yeah, it's a Fort Collins property. It's close to the Wyoming border, so it's very, very dark. It's close to a 22 up there. It's really dark. But nonetheless, you've got the Denver, Fort Collins lights coming through. And the bottom one is at Caribou Ridge, which I mentioned is the darkest place we found in Boulder County. And actually, Paul and I were there when they did this when it was kind of fun. See the truck down here? This is the NPS guy, and Paul and I were down here with him. And when he did this whole image, that was kind of interesting to see how that worked. Bad lighting and good lighting. Let's talk about that a little bit. So some of the things we mentioned, bad lighting contributes to that sky glow, shines straight up in the sky where you don't need it, causes glare, light trespass, waste energy, all that stuff. Good lighting points downward, reduces that glare, doesn't trespass, preserves the sky, and is more cost efficient, which is another bonus. This was from our house in Loveland. We don't live in Loveland anymore. We moved to Pinewood Springs this past September. But these are different kinds of fixtures that you can get at Lowe's or Home Depot, and they're not that expensive and they're easy to install. So this was a light post in our front yard that is one of those lights they have that's on all the time or whatever. So we put the hooded light fixture, so it just points down, and I put a yellow light in there, which is less disturbing to insects and wildlife in general. And it was very, very subdued, but it still provided enough light where you could get to the front porch or get to the front door. We put these lights on the front of the house, and the only time we turned them on is when somebody was coming over and needed to find the house. The rest of the time we never had them on, but even when they're on, again, it was just that light pointing downwards and giving you light where you need it there to see where you're going, but it doesn't shine all over the neighborhood. LED lights, I want to talk about those because it's confusing to people about what the heck that is sometimes. LED, they talk about color temperature, but they don't really have it when you feel them, they're not hot. I mean, there's no temperature involved with the way we think of temperature, but basically it's a Kelvin scale. They go from 2700 to 6500 Kelvin. So cool lights, this is the main two things you need to remember. Cool lights have higher numbers and warm lights have lower numbers. So cool lights are those bluish and green obnoxious lights and really bright white lights, like those big billboards they have on the side of the highway where you almost can't stay on the road because they're so bright at night. They have those really bright LED lights. And they're very high on the Kelvin scale. The warm lights are yellow, red, orange. They're warmer colors and much better for the nighttime. So IDA recommends using lights when you're outdoors like that with 3000 Kelvin or less to cause less interference. This is another question people ask sometimes because we're used to watts and the regular light bulbs, and then LEDs and halogen lights use lumens. So this kind of, not that you're going to remember this, I'm not going to test you on it or anything, but just to give you an idea, so like a 40-watt bulb has about 450 lumens. And so when you can look this up too, online or something, but you're looking at lumens, when you look at LED lights, and this kind of gives you an idea of how that relates to watts. So here's some light pollution solutions. These are 5 main principles that the IDA recommends thinking about when you're putting up lighting at your house. First of all, is it useful? Is there a purpose for that light? Why are you putting the light in a certain place? Secondly, is it targeted? Is it targeted to where it needs to be and not where it's not supposed to be? And that includes inside lights. So when you've got lights on inside the house at night, if you can shut the blinds or keep it from shining out to the outside. Low light levels, just use as much light as you need. Controlled, make sure it's going where it needs to be going, and then use those warmer colors. when you can.
So Deb, those lights that you showed, the down-facing ones,
Yeah,
they also come with motion sensors on them?
yes, you can
So,
get motion
like
sensor
the one
ones
The
too.
one on the front of my house is set for motion sensor, right? So it's on all the time, but it only works if something sets it off. So-
Right, yeah, that's
So when
another
people-
great
Because
thing.
we don't have street lights, so if people come up, they can walk up and it turns on for them. So.
Yeah, so they can see where they're going and then it cuts off, which is great. And that kind of fits under the, I don't know,
Controls.
Yeah, controls. So here's another question I get asked a lot is, what happens if you have a neighbor that's got a hugely bright light that's really bothering you and it's shining in your bedroom window at night or something? Just a few tips about how to talk to neighbors. First of all, get to know your neighbors, you know? If you're going up to somebody you don't even know and telling them something about their life that you don't like, they're not going to listen to you and they're not going to care. So you want to get to know your neighbors and be a good example yourself. Do the things you want to see modeled by other people. Share your protection, or share your passion for why you want the skies protected. Another fun thing you do is plan a star party in your neighborhood or a night event, you know, when people can come together and just enjoy the night sky. And what happens when they do that, if somebody in the neighborhood has a really bright light, everybody's going to notice that and think, oh my goodness, that's really bothering what we're doing here. You know, it becomes a little more obvious. Paul and I had several astronomy parties in our old neighborhood, and it was really fun. We met people that we'd never met before, and it was really kind of a fun thing to do. And be patient. Changes don't happen overnight, so we all have to take care of each other. Here are some resources. I'm going to come back to this at the end if you want, but that is the web page for the Dark Sky Association. Everything's on that page you ever want to know about protecting the night sky. They have stuff about the bird migration things we talked about, nocturnal animals, about human health, what you can do, what kind of fixtures you can buy, how you can do grassroots efforts in your towns to make changes. Everything is there. And the second one is the Colorado chapter. It has a lot of the information we talked about there. That's my email. I have a bunch of brochures and stuff here. You're welcome to take as much as you want home. My business card is there too, if you want to talk to me about something later. And then I want to leave you with this thought. So this is a picture of Los Angeles. And, you know, people will look at cities like that sometimes and think, wow, that's so beautiful, look at all the lights, it's pretty cool. And all these man or human-created places. But then what happens is, you know, you're looking at the lights in the city. Well, back in the late 90s, there was a big earthquake in Southern California, and they lost power. So when that happened, it was at night, and people in the town started calling 911, and they said, there's these weird lights in the sky, I don't know what they are. And it was the Milky Way. They had just never seen the Milky Way. So, like we talked about, being able to see the sky is a reminder that we are part of something much, much bigger. Planet Earth, like Carl Sagan said, is that pale blue dot, tiny, tiny little dot in this much larger universe. And the more you think about that, you more realize how important it is to protect our little planet. Because we're really pretty small compared to a lot of things out there. And also that reminder that half every day is night. And we're all a part of that too. So thank you, and if you have any questions, I'm glad to take those. I'll put this back up again.